Hi everyone, welcome to Tax Guru YouTube channel. This is CA Rohanar Pingai, practicing chartered accountant based in Mumbai, and I'm also partner in Motilal and Associates LLP, member firm of Marks Network. From last month, I had started with two YouTube series on Tax Guru YouTube channel, What Law Says case laws based series, one on income tax and another on GST. And now today onwards, I'm starting with third video series, and that is for everyone. That is on GST learning. Yes, relearning. GST in simple words, simple language. We will understand basic to advanced concept gradually. In this today's first part, we will learn, means we will go through important definitions under GST, and the second topic will be supply under GST. So let's start with it. Our first topic, definitions, important definitions under GST. Let me allow to share my screen. Important definitions under GST. First definition under GST is about goods. What is meant by goods? Goods means every kind of movable property other than money and securities, but includes actionable claim, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. Let's understand once again what is mean by goods. Goods means every kind of movable property. Every kind of movable property other than money and securities, but includes what? Actionable claim, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. Key point is goods must be movable at the time of supply. Goods must be movable at the time of supply is the key point. Next definition, services. All these definitions covered under section 2 of the GST Act, that is CGST Act 2007. Services. Services means anything other than goods. Okay, we have went through the definition of goods. Now we are learning the definition of services, and what it is. The first line is services means anything other than goods. Services means anything other than goods. This is the first part. We can learn the definition in parts so that it will be easy to understand and learn. So services means anything other than goods, money, and securities. Services means anything other than goods, money, and securities, but includes activities relating to the use of money or its conversion. Means goods, money, and securities are, means other than that are services. Okay, anything other than goods, money, and securities are services, but includes activities related to the use of money or its conversion for which a separate consideration is charged. Note is includes intangible items like software, IPR, even real estate related services. Third definition, supply. Section 7 includes all forms of supply of goods or services such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal for consideration in the course or furtherance of the business. It is very important part. In the course or furtherance of the business means supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services, all forms of supply of goods or services such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal for consideration, for consideration in the course or furtherance of the business. Three important aspects in these definitions are it is involvement of goods or services, consideration, and course or furtherance of the business. It also includes import of services for consideration, even if not in the course of the business. Means here, personal import is also covered and liable to GST. That is very import of services for consideration even if it not in the course of the business. Means other than that should be required in the course or furtherance of the business. But in respect of import of services for consideration, if even if it not in the course of the business, means you personally import anything, it will cover under GST and you paid for something that means for consideration is required. And activities in schedule 1 even without consideration. Activities in schedule 1 even without consideration is covered under supply. Next definition, business, section 2 subsection 70. What is mean by business? Business includes any trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, adventure, or vigor, whether or not for pecuniary benefit, and also includes government activities, race clubs, clubs or societies transactions with members. Includes government activities, race clubs, societies, transactions with members. Everything will cover under business. Business includes any trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, adventure, or vigor, whether or not for pecuniary benefit. Next definition, taxable person, section 2, subsection 107. Who is taxable person? A person who is registered. Means person who is not registered is not a taxable person. Person who is registered or liable to be registered under section 22 or 24 is called a taxable person. Difference is what? Only registered persons can claim ITC, but all taxable persons are liable to pay tax. What is the difference? Only registered person can claim ITC, but all taxable persons are liable to pay tax. Because what definition is says that a person who is registered or it is not and it is not a cumulative requirement. It is or either you must be registered or you may be liable to be registered, then you become a taxable person. And that is why the registered person can claim ITC, but all taxable persons are liable to pay tax, but not able to claim ITC unless they register to it. Means once they register, then they can claim ITC. Till that time, they can't claim ITC, but they are liable to pay tax. That is the crux of the this aspect. Next, input tax, section 2, subsection 62. IGST, CGST, UTGST charged on supply of goods, or services to a person and includes tax under RCM but excludes composition tax. What it includes is tax under RCM. Okay, means When you pay tax under RCM, you can claim that ITC, but exclude composition tax. Means if you are covered in composition tax, you can't claim ITC, or that can't be said as an input tax. So what is input tax? Input tax or IGST, CGST, SGST, UTGST, charged on supply of goods or services, charged on supply of goods or services, charged, very important, to a person, and includes tax under RCM but excludes composition tax. Next, input tax credit. Earlier definition was about input tax, and now the next definition is input tax credit. It is different. Means the credit of input tax available to a registered person. Available to whom? Registered person. That is what it is a difference in input tax and input tax credit. Input tax we can also say to about taxable person who is liable to pay tax but not registered. So there this term is usable, input tax. But when you become a registered person, then you can use this term input tax credit because you are a registered person. That is, input tax credit is available to a registered person. Composite supply, section 2, subsection 30. Two or more supplies naturally bundled. Two or more supplies naturally bundled, one of which is a principal supply. Entire supply tax as the principal supply. Composite supply means two or more supplies naturally bundled. Means they are not unnaturally bundled or something else. It is naturally come, naturally bundled, one of which is a principal supply. Entire supply taxed as the principal supply. Mixed supply, other than the composite supply. Two or more individual supplies, two or more individual supplies made together, it is not naturally bundled, no? Made together for a single price, that is say not naturally bundled is important. Composite supply is a naturally bundled, whereas mixed supply is not naturally bundled. It is made together for a single price, tax at the highest rate among them. Composite supply tax at what means whatever principal supply is in that will be taxed on that basis, but mixed supply is taxed on the basis of highest rate among them. Okay, tax at the highest rate among them. With those are the products made together and for a single price, and then it will be the highest of them, the item, it will be taxed at that rate. Next definition, recipient. Section 2, subsection 93. Who is recipient? Person liable to pay the consideration. Person liable to pay the consideration, or the person to whom goods or services delivered or supplied is the recipient. Means person liable to pay the, here also not used and, it is not cumulative condition, both are separate condition. When you are means either of the conditions satisfied, you become the recipient, like liable to pay the consideration or the person to whom goods or services are delivered or supplied is called recipient. Or what is used, person liable to pay the consideration or the person to whom goods or services are delivered or supplied. Any one of, if it is satisfied, then you become the recipient. Section 2, subsection 47, exempt supply. Very important. So we are discussing only the important definitions under the GST, which is useful for every accountant, every businessman can understand. Means my motto of this video series is to, we unnecessarily call it as a complex. Yes, it is complex at the advanced level, means at very different level. But if you want to understand the basic of it, what is a GST and all that, you can understand, means through this video series you can learn that basic concepts, and also we can go gradually to advanced concept in one by one, means after part one, part two, part three, we will move it that way. First we will understand basic concepts of GST. Around that, we will take each and every important areas covered under GST. Okay, but in a very layman words, layman language, everyone can understand it. That is the motto of this video series. So exempt supply is includes non-taxable supply and supply on which nil rate of tax is applicable. Exempt supply is what includes non-taxable supply and supply on which nil rate of tax is applicable. Here includes, it start with includes. So it is not cumulative. We both need to be, it is separate, but it's start with the includes and therefore and is used. It is includes non-taxable supply and supply on which nil rate of tax is applicable. So both are covered under exempt supply. They are two different aspects. There is used word of and, but that is not so. It starts with includes and therefore and is used, and that is giving us the two separate items, non-taxable supply and supply on which nil trade rate of tax is applicable are exempt supply. Reverse charge. Section 2, subsection 98. Last definition from our first topic of important definitions under GST means we had learned 12 important definitions under GST. Reverse charge. The liability to pay tax is on the recipient of supply instead of the supplier. We will learn gradually who is supplier, who is recipient. Means recipient we have went through, right? Supplier, most of us know. So the reverse charge is the term used when a recipient is liable to pay tax and not a supplier required to pay the tax. Okay, means who is a recipient of the goods or services delivered to the person who is a recipient, who will be liable to pay the tax, and then it is called as a reverse charge. And when supplier liable to pay tax or pay the tax, it is covered in forward charge. Means we can say, you can another definition, you can note down it, and please note down whenever you watch this video or when you listen to it, please try to make notes of it so that it will be helpful to you to revise the aspects of this, and you will relearn the GST. Okay. So reverse charge is the liability to pay taxes on the recipient of supply instead of the supplier. And whenever supplier is liable, it is called as a forward charge. So what definitions before moving to next topic, supply under GST, we will just revise whatever definitions we have learned today. Okay, important definitions under GST. First, we have seen goods, then what is mean by services, supply, business, taxable person, input tax credit, composite supply, mixed supply, recipient, exempt supply, reverse charge, and also forward charge. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, supply under GST. Our this part one video will end after this topic, that is supply under GST. Means in this part one GST Relearn series, we will cover important definitions of under GST and supply under GST. So let's start supply under GST. Understanding the concept of supply helps to determine what, whether GST is applicable, means why one required to learn the concept of supply. That is there. These are the reasons why we need to understand supply. Once we understand the concept of supply, we will able to whether GST is applicable, what type of tax is applied, when and how it is to be paid. This we will come to know when we understand the concept of supply. That is why understanding the concept of supply helps to determine whether GST is applicable, whether GST is applicable, what type of tax, CGST, SGST, IGST applies on, when and how it is to be paid. Key elements of supply. Supply includes or what elements include in supply is involvement of goods and services, means basic necessity of supply is involvement of goods and services, must involve a supply of goods, services, or both. Means in case of works contract, both includes supply of goods also and some supply of material also and supply of services like labor and that. So involvement of goods or services is must. Then second element is consideration. A payment, monetary or otherwise, must generally be involved. Must generally be involved. Okay. It is not compulsory, but must generally be involved. Consideration of payment, monetary or otherwise, is also a part. Monetary or otherwise. Course or furtherance of the business should be in connection with business activities. Okay. There is one thing is that import of service we have learned that where in case of import of services, it should not require in the course or furtherance of business. We remember that one thing, one difference. So other than that, everything should be in the course or furtherance of business to be covered under supply. Should be in connection with business activities. Taxable person must be registered person or someone liable to register. Okay. Here it is not key element is taxable person and not a registered person. See the how law is conveying us that key elements of supply is what taxable person, not a registered person. Taxable person is must be a registered person or someone liable to be registered. So this is the law language. Okay. Key elements of supply: involvement of goods or services, consideration, course or furtherance of the business, and taxable person. Okay. Supply includes broadly. What broadly supply includes is all forms of supply. We will see one by one. All forms of supply, import of service, schedule 1 activities, and schedule 2 activities. Supply includes broadly all forms of supply, import of service, schedule 1 activities, and schedule 2 activities. So let's move on ahead. Supply under GST section 7 of CGST Act. Supply is the cornerstone of GST. Without a supply, there is no tax under GST. Means if there is no supply, then there is no tax under GST. Without a supply, there is no tax under GST. The scope of supply is broad and inclusive, encompassing almost every form of commercial transaction. Almost every form of commercial transaction is covered. Okay. Important aspect is without a supply, there is no tax under GST. Legal definition. Okay. Section 7, subsection 1. Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, disposal, made or agreed to be made for consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of the business. These all forms of supply of goods or services or both should be made or agreed to be made for a consideration on by a for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of the business. Okay, and all forms we will see one by one. First, sale. What definition? Sale is a transfer of ownership of goods in exchange for money. Of goods, service is not here. It is completely different. So sale is a transfer of ownership of goods, transfer of ownership of goods in exchange of money. Money is also involved. So example, selling a refrigerator. Refrigerator is a goods to a customer for 25,000 exchange for money. Selling a refrigerator to a customer for 25,000. So it is a sale. Transfer. Transfer involves a shift of possession, or control of goods or services from one person to another with or without consideration. What is mean by transfer? Involves a shift of possession or control of goods or services from one person to another with or without consideration. An example, transfer of machinery from the head office in Delhi to a branch office in Mumbai. It is a shift of possession and of the goods. This actual physical movement of the goods is here involved. Okay. Transfer of machinery from the head office in Delhi to a branch office in Mumbai is a transfer. Barter. Barter is the exchange of goods or services for other goods or services without using money. Means wherever money is not involved, barter is the exchange of goods or services for other goods or services without using money. Without using money. Exchanging 10 laptops for office furniture means one side you are giving office furniture and taking the 10 laptops for that. So no involvement of money. Exchange. Exchange is transferring one item for another item of similar or different value, typically with partial monetary consideration. It's a little bit similar to barter, but not in the sense that it may cover some part of the consideration. Exchange is transferring one item for another item of similar or different value, typically with partial monetary consideration. Like example, trading an old smartphone plus rupees 10,000 for a new model. Means you are giving old smartphone plus 10,000 for a new model. Okay, that's called is exchange. License. License refers to granting permission to use intangible property like intellectual property without transferring ownership. Licensing refers to granting permission to use intangible property like intellectual property without transferring ownership. Example, licensing a software product to a company for 1 year. Then next, rental. Definition. Rental means allowing someone to use goods or property for a fixed time in return for periodic payments. That is like renting out a photocopy machine for rupees 2,000 per month is called rental. Most of everyone of knows this terminology. Lease. Lease is not like a rental. It's a little bit different. Lease is a long-term arrangement under which one party gives another right to use equipment or property or for a specified time in exchange for payment. Leasing a warehouse to a business for 5 years. Lease is a long-term arrangement under which one party gives another the right to use equipment or a property for a specified time in exchange for payment. Most of the times it is a long term, not like a rental can be a short term also. So leasing a warehouse to a business for 5 years, most of the leases are for 15, 20, 30 years, like that. Disposal. Disposal involves discarding or getting rid of goods, often with no consideration, which may still attract GST if done in the course of the business. Disposal involves discarding or getting rid of goods, maybe write-off also, often with no consideration, which may still attract GST if done in the course of the business. Means if it is done in the course of the business, then it will be covered under GST. Example, right? Writing of obsolete stock and discarding it from inventory, from the write-offs from the books. That is the case. Next, means we have covered 8 parts that one by one we have learned. What is mean is what is covered under supply. Supply includes all from this sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, disposal. So moving to the next, import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of the business. Okay, we are now coming to the point where we are covering import of services for consideration, whether or not in the course of the furtherance of the business. Means personal import is also covered under GST. Let's see legal provision. As per Section 7, subsection 1, clause B of the CGST Act 2017, supply includes import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. Interpretations and implications. Supply includes imports. Normally, supply under GST implies the provision of goods or services in exchange for consideration. Okay. What normally supplies include is the provision of goods or services in exchange for consideration. But this clause ensures that imported services also qualify as supply even if they are not related to business activity. Very important. Consideration is mandatory. The condition for such import to be deemed as supply is that consideration, payment must be involved. If no consideration is paid, means whatever import of service you have done, what main factor is that the consideration must be there. Must means should be there. Otherwise, if no consideration is paid, the import of service may still be taxable under Schedule 1, but only if it is between related persons and in the course or furtherance of the business. That is, and is used only if it is between related person and in the course or furtherance of the business. Whenever no consideration means consideration is must be involved in the import of service, and if it is done for business or not, it will cover under GST. But if no consideration, import of service, and you have covered under Schedule 1, that is to related person, from related person and in the course or furtherance of the business, then it will be covered under GST. Okay. This consideration is mandatory. Means whenever no consideration, we have to check whether that is taxable under Schedule 1, that is if between the related persons and in the course or furtherance of business is there, then it will be taxable. Business connection not required. Generally, we are learning import of service. Huh? Be careful. We are learning all these parts under the import of service. Okay, business connection not required. Generally, GST applies to supplies made in the course or furtherance of business, but in case of import of service, it is not required. However, this clause is an exception. Even if an individual imports services for personal use, GST is applicable if consideration is paid. If not paid, then you have to see whether it is in the course or furtherance of business and whether it is a related person. Then it will be liable. Tax liability. Such services are taxable under reverse charge mechanism and under IGST Act, wherein the recipient importer of services pays the tax. Tax liability. Such services are taxable under reverse charge mechanism under IGST Act, wherein recipient, importer of services pays the tax. Okay. Tax liability services are taxable under reverse charge mechanism. It is not covered under forward charge. Import of service is covered under RCM, wherein the recipient, that is importer of services, is liable to pay the tax. Very important. Example, if a person in India subscribes to an online streaming services from a foreign provider like Netflix US and pays for it even for personal entertainment, IGST is payable on this transaction. Okay. It is for personal entertainment. You have to pay, required to pay IGST. This transaction is treated as supply under GST law, even though it is not in the course of the business. Okay, clear? Till this, I think you all will be clear. If you still have any doubts, you can post to me. Please note down my email ID rohanrp1983@gmail.com. You can post your queries related to this to that email. Rohan RP, everything is in small. Rohan RP 1983@gmail.com. Activities listed in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration in supply. Now we are moving to Schedule 1. Okay, activities covered under Schedule 1. All the activities covered under Schedule 1 will be treated as supply. So let's start. What covered under Schedule 1? Schedule 1, supplies without consideration. That is deemed supply. Means here consideration may not be a part of it. And even then, it will be treated as supply and liable to GST. These are treated as supply even if made without consideration. Okay. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where ITC has been availed. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where ITC has been availed. Supply between related persons or distinct persons, branches in different states. Okay, even though there is a Delhi branch, Mumbai branch, like that, in whatever dealing they are, it will be related person or distinct person, and it will be covered as a supply. Supply by principal to agent and vice versa. Means principal to agent or agent to principal is also covered under supply. That is covered under Schedule 1 activity. Gifts to employees exceeding rupees 50,000 in value per financial year. Per financial year. Means 4 major activities are there under Schedule 1, that is supplies without consideration. That is deemed supply. Okay. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where ITC has been availed. Supply between related persons and distinct persons. Branches in different states. Supply by principal to agent or agent to principal. And gifts to employees exceeding rupees, exceeding, not equal to, and exceeding is less than equal to 50,000, not covered. Gifts to employees exceeding 50,000 in value per financial. Let's see one by one. Permanent transfer or disposal of businesses. Condition. Input tax credit has been availed on such a bill. This condition need to be satisfied in case of permanent transfer or disposal of business assets. Input tax credit has been availed on such assets. Example, a business permanently transfers a capital asset like machinery on which ITC was claimed to a related entity or donates it. What is the example? A business permanently transfers a capital asset like machinery on which ITC was claimed. ITC is availed to a related entity or donates it. This is an example of permanent transfer. Taxability deemed as supply even if no payment is received. Okay, in the above example, if it is donated, then consideration would be not involved. So it is a deemed supply even if no payment is received. That is a required for a taxability. Second, supply between related persons or distinct person. Supply between related persons or distinct person as per section 25. What is the condition? Supply is made in the course or furtherance of the business. Supply is made in the course or furtherance of the business. Includes means even if it is between the related persons or distinct person, it must not be a personal. If it is a personal, then it will not covered under this. Means the condition is required is to be made in the course or furtherance of the business. Related persons includes entities under common control, employer, employee beyond employment scope. Employer, employees also covered, but what they say is beyond employment scope. Distinct persons, who are they? Includes different GST registrations under the same PAN. Example, branches in different states. Means we have a Mumbai registration, then same PAN, but we have a branch in Delhi, then it will be called as a distinct persons. Example, goods sent from Maharashtra branch to Gujarat branch of the same company. Okay, then it will be a transaction between a distinct person, and it is of course in the course or furtherance of the business. So taxability, even without consideration, this is taxable. Even without consideration, this is taxable. That means GST has to be leviable. Supply between principal and agent. Supply of goods. Just a minute. Sorry for the interruption. Supply between principal and agent. Supply of goods by principal to his agent, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal. Supply of goods by a principal to his agent, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal. Supply of goods by an agent to his principal, where the agent receives such goods on behalf of the principal. It's A and B is part like that. Two are different, but they are covering the how the transactions will be taxability. Such transactions are treated as supply without consideration. Such transactions are treated as supply without consideration. Next, import of services from a related persons or establishment outside it. Condition, the import is for use in business. That is more important. Import is for use in business. Otherwise, if it is a use for personal, then it will not be covered. Okay. For example, an Indian company receiving management services from its foreign holding company, even without paying any consideration, then it will be an import of service between related person, or that is we called an distinct person, or called as establishment outside India. Not a distinct person actually. Is a sorry, I use that word. Distinct person is used when under the same PAN we have a branches located in India and a different state. Then it is a distinct. It will be a related person or a completely establishment outside India providing services to us. Next, taxability deemed as a supply under GST and subject to a reverse charge. Here, not a forward charge. What import of service is covered under a reverse charge mechanism. Now we will move on to activities treated as supply of goods or services as per Schedule 2. Actually, Schedule 2 is for used for a classification of supply as goods or services. Okay, that is C. Schedule 2 used for classification of supply as goods or services. Okay. It determines whether a transaction is treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Okay, means this needs to be means Schedule 2 is used to determine whether a particular transaction will be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Okay, let's see. Schedule 2 classifies certain activities as supply of goods or services, and therefore they are covered under GST, and that is the importance of Schedule 2. Let's see. Goods. Transfer of title in goods, sale of tangible goods. Okay, this both cover transfer of title in goods, sale of tangible goods. Then under services, renting of immovable property, construction of complex or building, works contract. Actually, Schedule 2 is important from the service point of view more than the goods. Works contract, restaurant and catering services, transfer of rights without transfer of title. Example, lease and license, right? So Schedule 2 classifies certain activities as supply of goods or services, and therefore they are liable to tax as per Schedule 2. Here I have made a table, a transaction type, and their its treatment under Schedule 2. Sale, treated as supply of goods. Transaction, transfer of right in goods without transfer of title, treated as supply of services under Schedule 2. Barter exchange, it depends on whether goods or services are involved. The treatment will be like that. License to use intellectual property, supply of services. Rental or lease of immovable property, supply of services. Lease or letting out building for business, supply of services. So the Schedule 2 is important actually from the service point of view is more. Transfer of title in goods, that is outright sale, supply of goods. Disposal of goods forming part of business assets. Disposal of goods forming part of business asset if for consideration treated as supply of goods. Let's see what is transfer under this. Transfer of title in goods treated as supply of goods. Transfer of right in goods or undivided share without title treated as supply of services. Transfer under an agreement stipulating future title transfer. Example, hire purchase, supply of goods. Land and building. Lease, tenancy, easement, or license to occupy land is covered under supply of services. Lease or letting of building, commercial or residential for business or commerce, supply of services. Treatment or process. Any treatment or process applied to another person's goods, supply of services. Transfer of business assets. Goods forming part of business assets used for personal use or non-business purposes. Goods forming part of business asset used for personal use or non-business purposes, supply of services. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where ITC has been availed, then it will be supply of goods. Under renting and construction, renting of immovable property, supply of services, construction of building intended for sale before completion certificate, supply of services. In case of building real estate business, it is required very much important part. Construction of building intended for sale before completion certificate, it will be supply of services, and after completion certificate, it become a supply of goods. Temporary transfer or permitting use of IPR, intellectual property right, supply of services. Development, design, programming of IT software, supply of services. Agreeing to obligation to refrain from act, tolerate an act, or do an act is supply of services. Transfer of right to use goods without title transfer, supply of services. Composite supply of works contract, construction of immovable property is also covered under supply of services. We have actually in earlier part we have talked about works contract service like for composite supply, right? That is supply of services. Means labor and material involvement, that is a works contract. Supply of food, drinks as part of any service restaurant, catering, etc. Supply of services. Now, next, in the next, I think so, 5 to 10 minutes, uh, we will end our first part and we will study composite supply and mixture. Okay, let's understand composite supply. Works contract. As per section 2, subsection 119, always treated as supply of services. Means works contract is always treated as supply of services. Supply of foods or drinks as part of service, that is example restaurant, is supply of services. Key legal understanding. Schedule 2 doesn't independently determine supply. It classifies a transaction already deemed as supply. Understood? What Schedule 2 is do. Schedule 1 is actually activities treated as supply. Okay, but Schedule 2 is not like that. It is doesn't independently determine supply. It classifies a transaction already deemed as supply. It aligns with Article 366(29), sub-Article 29A of the Constitution, and preserves classifications previously under VAT and service tax regime. Schedule 3 means before moving to composite and mixed supply, we will learn Schedule 3, transactions not treated as supply. Means under supply today we are covered Schedule 1 activities, that is to compulsory is treated as supply. Schedule 2 classification of supply in goods or services, and Schedule 3 transactions not treated as supply. These are outside the scope of GST even if done for consideration. Means even if there is a involvement of consideration, then even then it is not covered under GST. It will be treated as outside the scope of the GST. Okay, let's see. Sale of land or completed building except under works contract during construction. Okay, sale of land or completed building is a transaction not treated as supply. Actionable claims, we have learned this definition, except lottery, betting, gambling, all this covered under supply. Means lottery, betting, gambling are liable to tax covered under the supply, but actionable claims are not treated as supply. Services by employee to employer in the course of employment, court or tribunal services, funeral, burial, crematorium services. Thus, sale of land or completed building not a supply. Disposal without IT's claim or not in business context not taxable. Very important part. Disposal without ITC claim or not in business context not taxable. Types of supply. There are, you will maybe confused like, we have learned already types of supply there, but again we are learning types of supply. Yes, but what is these are taxable? Let's see. Under this types of supply, it will be a taxable supply, exempt supply, zero rated supply, non-taxable supply, and deemed supply, like that. So taxable supply attract GST, exempt supply no GST due to exemption, properly covered under exemption. Zero rated supply. Actually, zero rated supply is different from exempt supply. It is actually taxable, but like exports and supplies to say attract 0% tax but eligible for ITC or refund. Okay. Therefore, it is like this is a difference between the exempt supply and zero. Exempt supply and no GST due to exemption. Okay, but zero rated supply is a taxable supply, like export and supplies to save, but attract 0% tax. Okay, and eligible for ITC or refund. Means whatever tax GST you pay, it will be refunded to you. Means you can apply for refund of your ITC, right? Non-taxable supply, non-GS subject to GST, that is alcohol for human consumption, is non-taxable supply, not subject to GST. Deemed supply, specified in Schedule 1, means whatever activities covered in Schedule 1, all it will be seen as deemed supply, taxable even without a consideration. Deemed supply is specified in this should be covered under Schedule 1 and taxable even without a consideration. No involvement of consideration. Okay, and now we are moving to last aspect of this supply under GST for part 1. composite and mixed supplies we are going to see. Let's see composite supply. Section 2, subsection 30 plus section 8, clause 8. Definition. Composite supply comprises two or more taxable supplies. We have already learned this important definition. Two comprises two or more taxable supplies of goods or services or both, which are naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business, one of which a principal supply. These are the conditions of composite supply. Should be naturally bundled in conjunction with each other. They can be separate. Okay. Then in the ordinary course of the business, and one of which is a principal supply because it is taxable on the basis of the principal supply. That is, tax rate of the principal supply is applied to the entire composite supply. Example, a hotel provides accommodation, that is room service, along with the complimentary breakfast. Principal supply is what? Hotel accommodation. Ancillary is what? Breakfast. It is a naturally bundle. So entire bundle is taxed as a hotel accommodation service. Mixed up. Section 2, subsection 74, plus section 8, clause B. A mixed supply comprises two or more individual supplies. Okay, two or more individual supplies made together, not naturally bundled, made together for a single price, which do not constitute a composite supply. That is not naturally bundled. This is the important difference between the composite and mixed supply. And taxability, entire supply is taxed at the highest rate applicable to any of the items in the package. For example, a gift box containing chocolates, perfume, and dry fruits sold for a single price, not naturally bundled. Highest GST rate is 18%, applies to the whole package like that. And here we can see the comparison. Nature naturally bundle is composite supply. Artificially bundle is a mixed supply. Pricing not necessary to have a single price. Okay, and mixed supplied for a single price. And tax rate of a principal supply in case of composite, and in case of mixed, highest rate of tax. Naturally bundle, artificially bundle, not necessary single price, supplied for a single price. Principal supply, highest tax rate. And here example, travel plus insurance, that is a tour package, is an example of composite supply. And Diwali hamper with assorted items is an example for mixed supply. So this is all for the part 1 of GST Relearn series. Hope you are like this video and you will share this with your network for reaching to the mass to understand GST in very easy language, very in a layman words. Okay, I'm trying, and my motto of this video series is that. So anyone from the business point of view or from the accountant point of view can understand the concept of GST. Okay, so if you want to latest updates on the any income tax, GST, all this, then subscribe to Tax Guru YouTube channel for latest updates. So I have already, this is a third video series. So from last month, I am doing 3 video series on this Tax Guru platform. One is on income tax under case laws. Second is GST case laws. And third is now GST Relearn. Okay, let's see you in next part of the next video weekly on week-to-week basis. Okay, bye.